Welcome grade 7 and 8. In this science fair video, we're going to take a look at the conclusion, something that is probably the largest part of your science fair project as it wraps everything up. You have kind of made it to the end here. You've gone through, you've come up with a question, you've done background research to create a hypothesis, you've designed an experiment, you've carried it out, you've gotten results, and now you're at the end where you can tie everything together. And what the conclusion does is it allows you to take a look at all those different parts and show all the connections from beginning to middle to end, and even future thinking about your particular project. And so the conclusion is something that might be 2 or 3 paragraphs long, and it is a larger section because it includes so much. And beyond the basics of talking about reiterating your question, your hypothesis, your experiment, the results, and things like that, here are some other things that you can reflect on within your conclusion. 1, what do the results mean? So now that you've gotten all of these different results, now what? Do they show a connection that you were hoping to show? Do they really show that connection, or could it have been from something else? It's important for you to add that reflection piece within that conclusion. Number 3 here is really important. Do they support my hypothesis? That word support my hypothesis is important because although we love to say, yeah, I proved my hypothesis true, my hypothesis is absolutely right, we can't make that assumption. Based on the experiment you did and the specific things you've tested, there is support for your hypothesis. But because we haven't taken a look at all different possibilities or tested all different options, not only now, but throughout time and throughout history, we can't possibly say that something is proved absolutely true. This brings up this extend your thinking section, where it talks about this connection between, or difference between, this word called correlation and causation. We are looking for correlation. We are looking to show that there is a relationship or connection between these things that we've changed and the results that we got. And that's what we're looking for within our experimentation. But just because things are related or connected doesn't mean we can make the assumption that changing this caused this. To say that something caused something else, or causation, it shows a relationship or a connection that goes beyond what we were able to test or experiment. And so we can't say that something caused something else, but we can say that they are related or they're connected through the experimentation that we've done, and therefore your results support your educated guess or your hypothesis. And maybe they don't. We'll talk about that in a minute. You could also reflect on if there's any further work that might be needed. And this is an important part of your project as well, is future thinking. If someone were to redo your project, what different spins could they have on that? What different things could they change? Could they test? Is there something that could have been done differently if someone were to take a look at this again? Are there any other explanations for what happened? We want to try to eliminate all possible extra explanations for the results that we got, so that we can show in a better way that this is related to this, not because of any other factor. But there may be sometimes in reflecting afterwards that we say, yeah, you know what? We could have gotten this results because of this instead. And it's okay to admit that here. Or maybe there was what we call an extraneous variable, which is something that was outside of your control that you couldn't have affected, that may have changed, influenced, or affected the results that you got. What experiment or design changes should come next? Again, future thinking. If this were to be repeated, what could be the next step of this process? If you created an innovation, what would be the next step in order to make this even better, in order to go even further? Not that you have to make those next steps, but thinking ahead to if someone were to. How do my results compare with what I've read about the topic? Remember that in order to create your hypothesis, you had to have done background research. Have to. Doesn't matter what your topic is, you have to have done background research to have come up with an educated guess. Well, how is it that the results that you got connected with or connected to that research that you did? Did you find that your results were very similar to the research that you've done? Or did you find they were completely different, in which case that might be even more interesting? What would happen if I changed blank? Again, future thinking for your project. If I took another variable, if I changed this, if I changed that in my experiment, how do I think that that might affect the results that I might have gotten? What would have been better? What could have been better about my method? So now this is thinking about your procedure, the step-by-step process by which you carried out your experiment. Is there a way that that could have been improved upon? Sometimes it takes getting to the end of a project to look back on it and say, oh yeah, I could have made some improvements here and there and there. And when you're in the middle of it, you can't really see those things. But now in your conclusion, you have the chance to stop, to take a look back, and to reflect on those things. Then we get to this interesting question. What if my project didn't work? Don't worry. Your science fair project is not a failure. You're not going to lose all your marks on that project. But now you have a chance to reflect upon the question of why. And sometimes that question of why didn't it work can bring about even more interesting discussions than if it did work. So maybe it's a question about what might have gone wrong. Maybe there were things within your control that just didn't line up, that didn't work well. You thought it would, but it didn't. And that's okay. Those things happen. That's a part of the project. Maybe it were things that were out of your control that went wrong. Maybe they were within your control. And looking back, you say, yeah, you know what? I kind of messed up here. And that's okay to admit and reflect on. Was there an error in your work that could be fixed for next time? If this project were repeated, and if there was an error, where is it and what could be done differently? If your hypothesis is not supported, what did you learn instead? And sometimes that's even more interesting, right? It wasn't supported, so what other things came up as a result of that? And how does your new learning from your new result fit with your background reading or your background research? So your background research should have shaped your hypothesis, but if your results were completely different, why? Maybe you just found out something that all the background research hadn't discovered yet, in which case that's amazing, that's fascinating. But reflect on that. And then we get to the point where we get to the big so what question. It's the relevance and application. So now you found these things. You found out that these are related or these are connected. So what? How can we take it beyond this science fair project, and how can this have bigger applications in the world around us? So an important part of your conclusions will be to write about the real-world application of your work. So in other words, does your innovation address a highway engineering problem that will result in less asphalt wear and tear? Will your experiment allow plants to be grown with less water? Have you discovered something about how students respond to different stimuli that might affect the way advertisers send their messages? Maybe, for example, you found out that people remember things better if they're in the color red. Well, that's huge for an advertiser. Then that means that they should use the color red more often in their ads in order for people to remember their ads more. That has real-world application. This part of your report demonstrates the value within your work that goes beyond just this specific experiment, just for this specific project within this specific class. And this is something that you should be reflecting on within the bigger part of your science fair project called the conclusion.